Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to feature my recent conversation with Rodney Sullivan. Rodney is the Executive Director of the Richard A. Mayo Center for Asset Management here at the Darden School of Business. And he and I recently connected to talk more about his background, what led him to Darden, what opportunities are available to students at Darden who are interested in asset management, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my interview with Rodney Sullivan. Rodney, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brett. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Been looking forward to this conversation. How is everything going? How are you doing?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for asking. I've been very well. My family has been very well. We've been very fortunate to have ducked the disease. And we're also very fortunate and lucky to be in a town with, great access to wonderful world-class healthcare.
Yeah, I would say if you got to be somewhere at this particular time, Charlottesville is an all right place to be. A lot of great outdoor activities. You get a little bit more elbow room. Great, of course, all the things that people love about Charlottesville. Great restaurants. It's football season, basketball season's on the horizon, so lots to look forward to.
Put a lot of miles on the Appalachian Trail in the past 18 months.
Yeah, I can believe it. I have been logging quite a few miles here in the DC area as just a pedestrian, just walking around, not nearly as exciting as the Appalachian Trail. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. One of the things that's so much fun about hosting this podcast and having these conversations is you get to introduce listeners to all sorts of people here at Darden. And I think listeners are going to be excited to hear from you about what you do here. So let's talk more about you. Who are you and what's your role here?
So I'm Rodney Sullivan. So you've introduced me, and I'm the executive director of the Mayo Center for Asset Management, here at Darden. And my team and I work closely with faculty and students and alum to advance research, the Darden curriculum, and careers, all in the field of course, asset management, as the name suggests. So that's what we do. Very broad, but working very, very closely with a wide variety of folks across Darden.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit more about your background. What did you do before coming to Darden?
Well, I've been in finance and asset management my whole career, so 30 plus years now. So I've done a lot of things. But at a high level, my work is really focused on improving the investment community through what I call rigorous research and continuous education. And I've worked in a wide variety of areas, everything from corporate finance to institutional asset management. I worked for a large healthcare firm in the investment management area. I worked for a top hedge fund in the world. But I've also spent a lot of my career advancing education. I spent 10 years at CFA Institute, which is nearby here in the town of Charlottesville, and also worked for the CHI Association. So both CFA Institute and the CHI Association are similar in that they're organizations that are membership-based and both offer gold standard credentials in the areas of ethics and asset management. So my career has been on helping the investment profession from all different angles. My academic background, I have both undergraduate and graduate degrees from Virginia Commonwealth University in economics, and my emphasis has been on mathematics and quantitative finance. That's been the focus of my whole career. Quantitative asset management is really just the mathematical and scientific side of finance.
Well, let's go even further back. How did you decide that this was your path? What got you interested in the mathematical side of finance?
I've always been interested. Learning has always been top of mind for me ever since I was a little kid. I always loved to learn and read, and I never got away from it. So while I was early in my career, I was doing the CFA exam, of course, but I was also adjunct faculty at VCU, my alum. So I've always had a hand in either continuing to educate myself, but also sharing and helping to share that knowledge with others, with students and folks who are thinking about careers and asset management. So it's something I've never gotten away from, and my career just has kind of ebbed and flowed from education, back to asset management, and then back to education again, where I am now. So it's really a natural, it's always been a natural fit for me. And the Mayo Center is fantastic because, I'm leading the center, but I'm also teaching. It's been a big part of my time teaching and mentoring students and helping them, to think about careers in asset management. Given that my career has spanned, such a wide area, I hopefully I have some interesting perspectives, to share with the students as they're, really beginning their journey and potentially the field of asset management, but wherever it leads them.
So is Virginia home for you? Are you originally from Virginia?
Yeah, I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia, and my family dates back there several hundred years on both sides of my family. So yeah, I think it's safe to say Virginia is very much home to me. I have strayed away. I've lived in Connecticut and New York area for quite a while, but always drawn back to Virginia. I love it here. My family loves it here. It always feels like home. And I've traveled all over. I've lived in different places, but I've traveled all over the world, and I always look forward to coming back to Virginia. It's very much home.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about the Mayo Center. You started to talk about your role and how you interact with students. What is the Mayo Center for our listeners who are less familiar with the centers of excellence here at Darden? What's the Mayo Center?
So the official name, by the way, we haven't addressed this yet, but it's the Richard A. Mayo Center for Asset Management, which is a mouthful. But we're very grateful to our founding partner, Dick Mayo, who is a Darden alum and still very much engaged with the center. In fact, we have a second-year reading seminar that is very kindly held at Kinloch Farm, which is the farm that Dick Mayo spends a big part of his time. And he actively participates in this class along with myself and Pedro Matos. So we're very fortunate to have support of alums like Dick Mayo and others that support the school. So that's how we got started about 5 or 6 years ago. And the Mayo Center is a center of excellence here at Darden. So we sit alongside a couple of other centers, the Institute for Business and Society, the Batten Institute, right, for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and the Center for Global Initiatives. And the Mayo Center is one of these centers that we all work together alongside, the library and all the other parts of Darden, the Career Center, that makes Darden sort of what Darden is.
So one of the things that you just shared that I'm curious about, it's always fun to hear people talk about classes. And you mentioned this kind of reading seminar. What are you reading in that seminar? What are the students discussing?
Yeah, so this is it's a great question, and we read a wide variety, a wide cross section of things, and so we start with what's called traditional valuation and economic history. So how did we get here? How did our industry kind of get to where we are? And we're fortunate to also be joined by Bob Bruner for this class, who is a prestigious economic historian. And so we spend a lot of time, in order to understand how we move forward. It's helpful to understand how we got here. So we spend a lot of time, talking about the industry, how it evolved, and where we are now. And then we talk about ideas for looking ahead. And we kind of split the class up into 3 wide buckets, if you will, kind of the history of how we got here, traditional valuation analysis, which you do a deep dive here at Darden. If you're a student, you know that already. But if you're thinking about coming here, we do quite a bit of work on how to value companies. And then we do some work on quantitative finance and quantitative investments, which is more of my background. And it's another area of finance and way of evaluating companies. They're not so dissimilar from traditional fundamental analysis, but people think they are. And so we talk about sort of the parallels. Companies are companies, and you break them down all in the same way. And we read all kinds of, we listen to podcasts, we read, popular trade books, we read brokerage reports, we read all kinds of things to try to get as wide visibility into how people think about asset management and valuation as we can. And the students lead the conversation. That's the really fun part. So.
Well, I think about Bob Bruner, and he puts out that reading list every year, books that have caught his attention. I think of him as somebody who reads widely and always staying sort of active and sort of uh, thinking about things. It's incredible.
He's an amazing mentor. He's been very generous of his time, with me and also with the students. We're very grateful to have him. And you can ask him anything about economic history. He'll have the answer. It's amazing. It's just such a wealth of knowledge. But our industry it's really at an inflection point, in the sense that it's growing quite rapidly, and there's areas of asset management that are growing even more rapidly, such as private markets. So private capital, private equity, venture capital, real estate are areas that, they've been around for a long time, but in the last 10 to 15 years have been accelerating in their growth. And there's lots of wonderful opportunities for students to get involved in asset management, not just traditional like stock picking, as people, at least when I was in grad school, it was a long time ago, when used to think about, predominantly was how do you value a public company, and that's still a very big part of it. But it's an area that's just burgeoning is these private markets. And part of the mandate and part of the thinking of the Mayo Center is, how do we connect, with those areas that are growing quickly, both with with students, and build out curriculum and programming, for students to get involved in these areas. And we're pretty excited about this area because there's an increased focus on it, from the industry, but also here at Darden.
Well, I really appreciate that last point, because we always get this question from prospective students. How is the faculty incorporating current events and what's going on in the world? And, how is this kind of woven into the academic and co-curricular experience? It sounds like this is something that the Mayo Center is directly kind of engaged with.
Yeah. So, I like to break down the learning into two categories. There's the classroom learning, that we've kind of been focused on to this point, but there's also the experiential learning. People call it different things, but basically it's, getting hands-on practical experience, in the field of study. And, for the Mayo Center, we do many different things. An example of this is Darden Capital Management. So Darden Capital Management is a group of 25 students who lead investing for a significant amount of money for the foundation, over $25 million. There's 5 different investment management funds, and the students decide ultimately how those funds get managed. And that's like a perfect example, right, of hands-on practical knowledge and how you stay at the forefront. And so this group will also have guest speakers. So I mentioned alums before, how the Mayo Center is connected with alums. One of the wonderful things about Darden is the involvement of the alumni. I've yet to pick up the phone and call an alum, although I guess you don't really pick up the phone these days as much, it's more email, but I've yet to reach out to contact an alum who has said, oh no, I don't really want to spend time, with students. They always are more than happy to give back, to the community and to their school. And so we have speakers come in, Darden Capital Management does, but we have courses too, where we bring in speakers to, provide current perspectives and current thinking, and a variety of thinking, on asset management. So there's lots of different ways the students can get that hands-on experience. Another wonderful way is our summer internship program. We call it the Mayo Center Summer Fellowship Program. And here we work with the Career Center and a variety of firm sponsors in asset management, all from traditional asset management, private equity, venture capital, real estate, all different areas of asset management, where we connect, that firm with a student. Or a group of students, as the case may be, and then the students spend the summers, at those organizations and get that hands-on experience. And there's nothing like rolling up your sleeves for a summer and spending it, at an asset management firm to see how the work of work gets done, as I say. So again, back to your question, just lots of really great opportunities for students to get that hands-on experience.
Well, I want to pause here for a second because I think one of the challenging things, if you're a prospective business school student and you're just trying to figure out what people do with an MBA, is there's a lot of jargon, right? There's maybe things that you've never heard, or like what is consulting, for example, or what does it mean to work in investment banking and asset management? I think is maybe one of those things that people they hear a lot, but maybe don't know exactly what it is. So, what is asset management? What does it entail?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And what's interesting too about if you ask different people what asset management is, you may get different answers. Our industry hasn't quite landed on a single definition, but for me, it's all about the preservation and growth of wealth for investors, and in so doing, putting the interest of the investor first and foremost. So to me, those are the keys. And if we're not accomplishing that, right, if we're not accomplishing that two-pronged mission of helping to grow and preserve wealth, and putting the interest first, then we're simply not succeeding as a profession. That's my own view. That's my own. You can probably tell it's a pretty strong view, but it's a view that I've come to after being in this profession for many, many years and having Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, being a friend and mentor of mine. He passed away a few years ago, but I was very fortunate to know him. So it was something that has definitely stayed with me in my career. But it's hard to. That's still maybe a little bit vague. So when my kids ask me, when they were younger, what do you do? Like, what is finance anyway? What does that even mean? And I would just tell them very simply, it's I help people to retire better. I help them to retire more comfortably and better than they otherwise would. So that's my definition. That's how I think about it. But it works. I think it works.
I think so. So let's talk about what career paths may be available. I mean, you mentioned a lot of different things and some growth areas that you're seeing in this industry. When you talk to students and planning sort of their career, passionate about asset management, interested in this, what are some of the paths that are available to people?
Yeah, so this is very challenging oftentimes for folks who haven't been in the business and haven't had exposure to it. So I'll give a detailed answer to the question, but to come back to how the Mayo Center works across Darden, we work with the Career Center. We work directly with students. We have on one of the very first days of school, we have a welcome session for all first years and second years if they want to come. And I mentioned alums and how helpful they were or are. We have a guest speaker that comes and joins the class. And they talk about sort of their career and their path and broadly the asset management industry. And they lay what I call the groundwork and the landscape. What is the asset management landscape? What does it look like? It takes about 30 minutes to kind of go through all of that. We probably don't have time for that today, but we do, and I can touch on some of that. But the point is here that we offer tools, right, for students to help them to navigate that challenge, because it's definitely not easy. So the way that I think about to get back to your question to answer, the way I think about the asset management industry is broadly two buckets. There's traditional asset management, which is stocks and bonds, right? So you think about public markets. When you turn on CNBC, that's predominantly what they're talking about. If you do that. So that's traditional public markets. And then there's private markets that I was alluding to earlier. So private markets are still very important markets, but they are private by their very nature. So these are things like oftentimes real estate, private equity, venture capital, and even hedge funds. And so when you put these two together, you get this big universe, right, of the area of asset management. And students can go into any of those areas, any individual one of those areas, and there's sub areas right within there. But another, sometimes students are like, well, I like all of this. I don't quite know which area I want to dig into. There's opportunities for those students too. There's iBanking. There is consulting work that's, specific to asset management. There are, organizations that help the world of asset management and asset owners allocate capital. These are like what's called OCIO or outsourced CIOs. There's endowments like the UVA Investment Management Office. So, they see all the landscape of investment opportunities. And then, there's also pension plans. So these are retirement plans, like large retirement plans, like the Virginia retirement system that's just down the street. So if you don't quite know what area you want to get into, that's fine. There are organizations and that spend their whole day, every day, thinking about how to put all these different disparate asset classes together in a meaningful way. And a student can go into one of these and learn about all the different areas of asset management, even in more detail, and how all the pieces fit together than you would get even in a classroom here at Darden. So the area of asset management and even more broadly finance is very broad. It's hard to pin down into a sentence or two. But it's a process. It's an iterative process with the students where we join, arm in arm with them and kind of walk, join them in that discovery.
So you mentioned this fellows program. What was the inspiration for creating that program? Where did the idea come from? I think about the technology venture fellows, which that institute has, and there's also the BVIP is out there too.
Yep.
These kind of programs, and that's an internship program for people who want to work maybe for more emerging or early stage companies that may not necessarily have established internship programs. And so there are these kind of resources across Darden, and I was excited to hear that the Mayo Center has a similar type thing. So what was the inspiration?
Yeah, so we picked up, the Batten, Mayo Center is fairly new. Batten Institute has been around much longer. So we did learn from them, like we do partner with them. We do, learn from our peers. And interestingly, you point out, BVIP, and, the things that Batten is doing, we partner with Batten. So one of the areas, for instance, that overlap, the Mayo Center and Batten overlap is in the area of venture capital. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to need access to venture capital. So it's the other side of that coin. If you ever watch Shark Tank, right, you have the venture capitalists pitching the sharks, and so they're two sides of the same coin. And so it behooves us for sure to partner directly with Batten in the area of venture capital and entrepreneurship. And so now we do that explicitly. So we have we have a brand new that just launched a few weeks ago, the Venture Capital Initiative. It's being led on the staff side by Robin Swift and on the faculty side by Elena Luskina. And we're thrilled to have them both leading this effort. And as part of that is internships and venture capital and entrepreneurship that are offered, to students. So the inspiration is how can we best help students succeed, right? And inspiring them to succeed in their careers. How do we help them with jump off a springboard, right, into this world, which is, it's not oftentimes easy to find, like, how do you get into this business? Because it is, it can be, it's in certain areas, venture capital in particular can be niche. It can be hard to break into. So this was the inspiration, is alum giving back, right, to the school. Most often, not always, but oftentimes these fellowships are with firms that have various alums that are part of that firm. So it's a way of just connecting, right, the students back into, as I mentioned at the outset, back into practice. How do they get that hands-on experience? So yeah, we're thrilled to be able to offer these. It's through the Mayo Center and the generous funding of Dick Mayo and the other founders, of the Mayo Center. So we're just in a really fortunate position, to be able to do a limited number of these. So it's been quite successful. We hope to have, between the venture capital and the other areas, of asset management, well over a dozen, fellows this summer.
It feels like between the Venture Capital Initiative and also the Breakthrough Scholars Program that there's a lot of energy right now at Darden around some of these things. And it feels like, these have always been, there's always been energy, but it's kind of gone to another level here. It must be exciting to kind of be in these conversations.
Yeah, the Breakthrough Scholars is exciting. In fact, just before Brett, that you and I were connecting, I was sitting down with the Mayo Center recipient of the scholarship award for this current year, and so it's something that we're very excited to be able to offer and be able to continue to do, and to be able also to there is an unfortunate perception of our industry that it's not as diverse, right, as it should be or needs to be, and that's a fact of where how the industry has evolved and where we are. It clearly is not as diverse as it should be and needs to be. So it's a conscious effort, across Darden, not just the Mayo Center, but across Darden, to find ways to bridge that gap, to help and encourage diverse students and underrepresented minorities to, enter this space of asset management, because it can be a wonderful career.
I'm excited. We're going to have Greg Fairchild on the podcast. He's a friend of the podcast, been on here several times, talk about different things, ethics through literature course, his role here in DC, which is expanding by the day here. But he's going to come on the podcast to talk about the Breakthrough Scholars Program. We're excited about that. I want to also talk about what I think is like one of the really signature events that happens at UVA every year, and it's the UVIC. It's the conference around investing. It's incredible. It's a whole bunch of people in the Avid Auditorium. Feels like events go on maybe for a whole weekend, maybe longer than that. A lot happens.
Yeah. So UVIC is the acronym for the University of Virginia Investing Conference. So it's a conference that we do pan-wide. We do it in partnership with McIntyre and across the university, and it is typically held here in person at Darden. Last year was not. Last year was held virtually, of course, and we've just made the decision to launch UVIC as a virtual event again this year, due to the rise of the pandemic again. But it is an exciting event. We usually have 300 to 400 people in person. Last year, and in fact, it turns out that last year was we were focused on climate change and ESG, which is a acronym for environmental, social, and governance investing. And we had the best attendance ever because it was virtual. And we had, at one point, I think we had over 1,000 people in attendance of that. So we're hoping to have that same experience this coming year. This coming year, we're going to be talking about a wide array of things on how to think about investing, and how the pandemic really has changed the world of investing, because it has changed, a lot of things for a lot of different industries, and asset management is certainly one of them. So, and investing has certainly changed. So how has giving deep thought to how the world has changed as it relates specifically, to asset management. And we're going to have it's going to be a half-day event, and again, it'll be all virtual, and it'll be followed by, and you can find information. I'll plug, if a shameless plug is okay. So you can find information on our website, the Mayo Center for Asset Management. You can Google that. You can find information on UVIC, and so it's open to anyone who wants to register and attend. So it's going to be free of charge. So please, we hope to see a lot of people there again this year. Look at the lineup, and we think it's going to be very compelling. It'll be very interesting. We're going to cover a lot of different areas there, all the areas that we've talked about, Brett, today. So venture capital, traditional investing. We're going to talk about blockchain and crypto. So it's going to be exciting. And then we're going to follow that with a student-led event that we call DVIC, another acronym, but it's the Darden Investing Conference. So this is a student pitch competition. So this is where not just Darden students, but students from all around the world. So we'll have folks from the London Business School, for instance, and participation this year virtually. So students from all over the world compete to see which team can give the very best pitch on a publicly traded stock. So that's another sort of exciting thing, and that'll take place on Thursday and Friday, virtually here, be hosted here at Darden. So it's another way that students can get that sort of hands-on, experience and get the feedback from practitioners. So it's judged by experienced practitioners, and they provide really tough questions. You give your pitch, and then you get some pretty tough questions, from experienced asset management folks. So, but it's a great learning experience for the students. And then there's a cash reward at the end. So there's incentive, which we're a big fan of.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. But we've talked about the E-Cup in the stages of the E-Cup a bunch here on the podcast. We haven't had a chance to talk about DVIC yet. So this is great. This is great, Roddy. We're going where this podcast has not gone before. So I appreciate that. And what a time to have that conference. I'm just thinking we've been hosting this faculty-focused webinar series called Office Hours. And we had Rich Evans, he was the first person to come on, finance faculty member here at Darden. We talked about SPACs. We talked about, this is like right on the heels of GameStop. We talked about crypto a couple times, both with Rich and Kenda Hatcham. And interesting thing about crypto, I think there was just something in the news that the Treasury Department's trying to figure out, kind of regulatory guidelines for it to keep from there being a run on crypto, essentially. And now you have this monetary policy shift that's perhaps coming as you kind of think about where the economy is going here in the U.S. and then China, maybe some sort of bubble. I mean, there's a lot of things out there, right?
Brett, I think you just ran down the agenda for UVic. So thank you for that. You hit all the nice hot spots there. So we're gonna have two practitioners from China that are going to be joining us, and they're going to talk about what's going on over there. I mentioned, cryptocurrency, but more broadly, blockchain. What's happening there, and what's happening with the SEC and the Treasury, and trying to get their arms around, this blockchain and cryptocurrency, and what to do about it, how to regulate it or not. Every country is, sort of dealing with this simultaneously. So we haven't figured it out yet. But it's certainly a growing area, and blockchain, of course, as everyone knows, has wide applications way beyond blockchain. So we're going to get into all of that, and then how all these what does it look like as all of this unfolds. With the we're going to have a monetary authority expert that's going to join us from London. So we're going to get into all of this. It's going to be. I'm really looking forward to it. It's I don't know if we'll answer everything in the 3 hours that we have, but we're certainly gonna we're gonna pack in a bunch and we're gonna peel it back. So it's gonna be exciting.
That's great. Well, Rodney, you covered a lot of ground here, and I think if my goals of this conversation was for people to hear about all the exciting opportunity that's available here at Darden for people who are interested in asset management, just want to learn a little bit more about it. What is it? What someone can do here. Anything else you would want to highlight? You would want students to know about, asset management at Darden. I mean, you've been here, you're working with students, you're engaged with alumni and faculty. Anything you'd share beyond what's been shared so far?
Yeah, I would just want to reinforce, that the Mayo Center doesn't work in isolation. We work closely, all across Darden with the faculty, the Career Center, and alum to provide students with hopefully will be an inspiring and well-rounded, learning experience that they can, take with them for the rest of their life. And they'll always want to come back, to Charlottesville. So that's what we hope to leave them with. And I would just encourage them students to keep an open mind. The world's obviously evolving, rapidly. It's overused, but it's true. But keep an open mind, because one of the wonderful things about Darden is it's a wonderful experience. There's lots of clubs in different areas of asset management. If you're thinking about career in asset management, join all the clubs that are related to asset management, finance, investment, venture capital, real estate. Join all of them. And go to all of them, because you're welcome. And students are very open and giving, of their time and sharing of their experiences. So, enjoy it. Enjoy the time and learn from it. And maybe you'll come away a different person for sure, but maybe you'll come away with a different career aspiration.
Well, when you have a podcast guest and they anticipate your next question, you know you really have an expert podcast guest on your hands. So, Rodney, you got my last question, which is, what's your best piece of advice? Keep an open mind. Come here, explore, make connections, get involved. Yael Grushka-Kane, who was the senior associate dean for our professional degree programs here at the Darden School, said something in a blog post, which I think is universally true. Everybody who's come here on the podcast has said some sort of variation on this, is you get out of Darden what you put into it. That is just incredible reflective quality to the experience. The more you put in, the more you get out. I think that really resonates with what you just shared.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And don't hesitate to ask. Don't hesitate to ask for help. Don't hesitate to ask for questions. And we're here to make it a rich and rewarding experience.
Well, Rodney, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and good luck with UVic.
Thanks, Brett. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope to see you there.
And that was my interview with Rodney Sullivan, Executive Director of the Richard A. Mayo Center for Asset Management here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.